That is the Apple spaceship campus in Cupertino. And before that, it was a Hewlett Packard campus. And I worked in building 43, which is right in that back corner.
Okay, okay. And then, I was reading somewhere that you worked or at the same level with Steve Jobs at Apple.
Yeah, I was the business unit manager of the Apple III product line, making money while Steve was losing money trying to get his Macintosh developed as the general manager of the Mac division. I asked for the title general manager. They said, no, you got to be the independent business unit manager, or BUM for short.
That's interesting. So tell me a little bit about that stuff. I'm genuinely interested in, like, the tech and the world like that. It's so you read about things or you see things on television or on the internet, but you don't really know the real story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember in the late '80s, John Sculley, who was president of Apple for the second year that I was there, he wrote a book about his experiences in Apple. And since I was an expert as the bum on the Apple III, I picked up his book at the bookstore in the airport when I was traveling. Flipped to the index, looked up Apple III, then went to the 2 or 3 pages that he mentions it, and it was all wrong. And I had one guy tell me that he wants to grow up and be just like John Sculley. And that's one of the problems of following these audio biographies that were written by ghostwriters. They make stuff up in order to make the author look good. It's sort of like Donald Trump's Art of the Deal, which was ghostwritten. So you have to be real careful about that and go to the primary source, not the secondary or tertiary source.
What did you find were the main differences in, like, what the ghostwriter wrote versus what the truth was?
Well, the person that introduced the Apple III, the first product manager, is a guy by the name of Steve Jobs. And he failed to ensure that there was any quality assurance on the manufacturing of the computer. So when it was shipping in the fall of 1980, it would arrive with the dealer's dead on arrival, called DOA at the time. And it turned out that the chips used in the circuit board would work their way loose during the shipping process. So they never bothered to build a computer and ship it to somebody else, in a box and see what it looks like when it comes out of that box. So they were all dead on arrival, or many of them were. And a friend of mine, Semi Asafor, who worked in service, found that if he lifted the thing up about a foot above the table and dropped it, all the chips would reseat themselves, and then the computer would boot up. But Steve was so self-obsessed at that time with himself, he shipped the computer without an operating system. And as a result of that, it also did not have any software. So for the first couple of years, you could do nothing with the Apple III. So he campaigned that the computer was a failure in order to cover up for his personal failures. And then Apple hired some overpaid MBAs from Harvard and from MIT and from Stanford, and they could never figure out what the market was for the computer. So they all kept saying that the computer was a total failure, when it wasn't. At that point, when I took over, they had shipped 50,000 of the Apple IIIs, and it was the third most popular computer in the world by units. First was the Apple II, second was the DEC PDP-11, and the third was the Apple III. And then in the last year of its life, when I was the business unit manager, we generated enough cash, so I think it was about $600 million in profits, to help pay for the Mac development. And if Steve was successful in killing the product line as he wanted to do, he would have been in bad shape trying to find the money to finish his Mac development. And we also created enough profit to keep about 1,000 to 1,500 Apple employees employed. And about 6 months after I shut the product line down, those 1,000 to 1,500 Apple employees were let go because the cash just wasn't there for them. So if you want to talk about failures, let's talk about Howard Hughes' Spruce Goose first, and the Apple III last.
So, but I imagine, like, and this is the first time I'm hearing this, that was probably a lot of that was kept hush hush at the time for stocks and stuff like that, or just in general.
There was there was a rumor going around in the late 80s that the reason they shipped the Apple III early is because the company is going to go public in October of 1980. And if they revealed the problems that they were having with it and and did not ship it then, it would have affected the initial stock offering price. I don't know if that's true. The guy that I worked for, Joe, he used Ken Zerby was his name. He was the CFO at the time, and he said that's not the case. So I don't know, but there was an effort to cover up the failures of management and marketing, which goes on today. In fact, this is August, what is it, 14th, 2025. And David Pogue from CBS Morning Show is about to put out a book about the Apple history. In the previews of it, he says he's interviewed 300 people and talked about the Apple III as a failure. And I was not one of those 300 people that he talked to. Yet everything I've just talked about is in the last 30 pages of my book, Building and Sailing Great Products. And I published Building and Sailing Great Products in 2016.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about a little bit about that book. So now I'm interested with this stuff with, the cover-ups and, I don't want to say a cover-up, but we'll use that term, non-exposure, I guess we should say. But let's talk a little bit about your book and how you talk about these things and, any other good, juicy stuff. Because, my followers are always interested in this type of thing.
Well, let me add that in terms of the public story of Apple during those times, it came from a public relations firm called McKenna, I forgot his name, Regis McKenna and Associates. Regis was one of the first investors in Apple. And in fact, he was the one that introduced Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and the other founder, whose name I forget, to Mike Markkula, who had just retired as a 32-year-old marketing manager for Intel, the chip manufacturer. And Mike put money into it. And later, when they let Scott go as president, he took over as the interim president. And he was president for the first year that I was at Apple. And then the second year was John Scully. So they had a vested interest to cover up the mistakes they made with the Apple III. And the funny thing about it is when I took over as the Apple III group product manager, before they promoted me to being a bum, I asked all of the wise MBAs at the company, who was the product built for? Who was the customer? What problem were we trying to solve? And they couldn't answer the question. So therefore, they thought it was a failure because they did not know who the product was for. So I went and talked to a fellow by the name of Jeff Raskin, J-E-F Raskin. And Jeff was one of the initial key architects for the Apple III, engineer, computer scientist. And I asked Jeff, who did you build this for? He said, I built it for the business and office market. And he was in the basement of the Triangle building that our offices were in along Highway 280 and Lawrence Expressway in San Jose. And all these bright MBAs couldn't figure that out, that it was focused on the business and office market to be able to do things like word processing, databases, spreadsheets, accounting, and so forth. Some of the key functions that were currently being done on time sharing and mini computers in the world could now be done on your desk for a fraction of the cost.